Hello and welcome to the Arise interview, where we take time to reflect on the big stories from the news and on the fortunes and affairs of the world in an hour of conversation with commentators, analysts and thought leaders. I'm Charles Aniegolu. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, should the Nigerian government be forced by law to increase the representation of women in both elective and appointed positions? Should companies be forced to appoint women to their boards? Are mandatory quotas desirable or necessary to ensure more diversity in government and company boardrooms in this country? Well, absolutely, says one of Nigeria's most internationally accomplished women, Professor Joy Ezelio, who's been campaigning to increase gender diversity in Nigeria. In addition to being the former UN Special Rapporteur on human trafficking, Dr. Ezelio is a law professor at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and a leading global authority in international human rights, especially on the rights of women and children in Africa. She's also the director of the Women's Aid Collective, an NGO that promotes the human rights of women and young people, and a member of the United Nations Civil Society Advisory Board, and is a visiting professor at several universities in North America. Professor Joy Ezelio, my guest today. Coming up. Now, if there's one person who's worked tirelessly and persistently to push humanity in a more inclusive direction, it would have to be my guest today, the Dean Emeritus of the Faculty of Law at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and former UN Special Rapporteur on Human Trafficking, Professor Joy Ezelio. Having worked assiduously to tackle human trafficking on the global level and to fight for the rights of women around the world, she's turned her focus on Nigeria, and along with a host of other rather determined women of prominence, is trying to get the Nigerian National Assembly to pass laws that support the increased participation of women in politics and other sectors in the country. In furtherance of this, they held a high-level roundtable discussion on Tuesday, challenging lawmakers, leaders and executives, aiming to make them comfortable or uncomfortable enough to create the legal conditions to reimagine Nigeria's male-dominated world.
Women's equal opportunity and treatment in political life is a representational right and should be seen and treated as such. And in addition, women's perspective, thoughts and experiences enrich governance and make the latter more responsive to the needs of diversity of the country's citizenry. Low participation, therefore, is a problem. Inequality in the distribution of voice, representation, influence in public sector, and political process is a problem.
We think that women participation in revolution will translate to their representation in power. It doesn't work that way. And these are lessons for what is happening in MENA regions, that we don't take this for granted, because women participate actively in politics in Nigeria, right from the struggle for colonialism, democracy, and we have not seen this reflect in their representation.
A rather distinguished Professor Joy Ezelio there, and I'm hugely honored to say that the former UN Special Rapporteur on Human Trafficking, Dr. Joy Ezelio, joins me now in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. You can look at me, that's
okay.
all perfectly
yeah,
all right.
You.
I'll try and push my horns back in so they don't frighten you.
Thank you so much.
Is it fair to say that one of the underrepresented groups in Nigerian politics and in elective office, and for that matter the boardroom, is women?
Yes, yes. I would say where the power is, women are not. And that's terrible.
So you're pretty powerful.
Yeah, where the power is, women are not. And when you think of not just the population of the women, the fact that we have the numbers, but again that women are intellectuals, they are successful business people, they have made it in all spheres of life. And then when you look at the status of Nigeria, even within Africa, they occupy a prominent position. But when it comes to all the indices of development, especially with regard to gender equality, which is the Sustainable Development Goal 5, empower all women and girls and to eliminate all forms of violence, you see that we are not doing well. In fact, the Global Economic World Forum report, the global report showed, in fact, it revealed that Nigeria ranked 146, if I recall. But I know that out of the 153 countries assessed in the area of health, political participation, education, and then gender, Nigeria 146, surpassing only 7 countries. And that's very dismal.
That is bad.
And when you look again...
in the 21st century.
Exactly. If you look at after the 2019 election results, including all the, because there have been some kind of realignment, those who have lost in tribunals and those who have also come on board, our representation in elective position still stood at 7-point-something%. In fact, nationally, including the House of Assemblies, House of Representatives, and then the Senate. And that's dismal. That's unacceptable.
What do you
think
is...
That's a gross underrepresentation.
Absolutely. I think any right-thinking person would absolutely, unequivocally agree with you. But why do you think it's that way?
It's a combination of factors. Apart from the social norms, the patriarchal system, but we are not only the only patriarchal society in Africa. I think we share a lot of commonalities with other Africa. But why is it that in Nigeria that women have not had any way? In fact, we retrogressed. And I think one of the major reasons is the lack of enabling environment, the high monetization of politics, the violence in the political terrain, the winner-take-all attitude, and the fact that it has become a quick means of money-making for some people. So they wouldn't let go. But if it becomes maybe the money is not flowing anymore, there.
If the focus is more on public service, yes,
then you will see people will take up. People wouldn't want to go in. Look at teaching profession. Look at others that have become over-segregated with the female population. They are not finding it interesting anymore. And now, look, it's just a question of, it's about power, privilege, and all the appurtenances of office that comes with it.
Now, you delivered a paper on Tuesday, I believe, at a round table on female participation in politics in Nigeria. I think the topic was increasing women's representation through constitutional reforms. You are, of course, a professor of law,
yes,
so it's right up your street. Briefly summarize the argument you were making in your paper.
What I'm saying is that we can't constitutionally provide for equality if equality, or at least ensuring inclusion in governance for women. And we can say since Beijing, there have been advocacy around 30%. The national gender policy says 35%, at least 35%. And we can insert it in a constitutional provision. Very easy. We could look at Section 42 that prohibits sex discrimination, and in there make emphasis with regard to political participation and marginalization of women or other groups. And we can also look at Section 14.3, not currently justiciable, but in this constitutional reform, and all the advocates and many voices from everywhere, they are saying that we should have that as justiciable, and 43, by the way, on federal character. But if you look at it in the federal character and constitution of public offices and appointment at federal level and what have you, you will find that it does not provide for gender character. It talks about federal character, ethnicity mainly, and making sure of that diversity. But that diversity should be explicit, so that we know that diversity we are talking about now in the world we live in, where we are talking about leaving no one behind and inclusion as a matter of social justice. There should be a specific provision that will say, provided there is no domination of any one gender. And that will give even the youth also opportunity, and the women. And there are other parts of the Constitution that could be modified, because the part of the obstacle, even for INEC to enforce anything, is that most of the constitutional provisions and the electoral law doesn't have any provision that speaks to enabling or increasing female participation. So INEC cannot work without any of those enabling legal framework. So we can also, in terms of appointee, because now we can't just talk about elective position. There is a right to vote and be voted for, which is in the Constitution. But then who is being voted in? So that's what we're talking about. If you're 18 of age, you can vote for others. But in that voting, should one, because even in the provisions of the Constitution with regard to those formation of parties, they talk about not one ethnic group dominating a party. In fact, if we say we are floating just all women party, we may be violating constitutional provision. So why should we not have equal participation of women there? Section 147 or 192 of the Constitution talking about appointment of ministers and commissioners at state level is also another area we can tweak and provide.
No, absolutely, I agree.
That at least 30%.
Sure, we've got about less than a minute before we have to take a break, but we'll keep talking. I mean, I'm just curious because I'm wondering why, given the fact that the Constitution has empowered women, for example, to vote, and they've got very large numbers, why we're not seeing that reflected?
Because of money, because of culture, because of religion, and the conceptualized dichotomy of public and private space.
Right. Okay, let me just ask you to hold there. We'll keep talking about this particular issue when we come back. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat with Professor Joy Ezelio about increasing the representation of women in both elective and appointed positions in Nigeria. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyegolu. So, should Nigeria join countries like Rwanda, the Netherlands, Norway, France, Italy, and Belgium, to mention a few, in passing laws that oblige federal and state governments, as well as publicly listed companies, to have at least 35% of both elective and appointed positions reserved for women? Well, that's what female lawmakers in the Senate and House of Representatives are pushing for, supported eminently by the likes of my guest today, the law professor and former UN Special Rapporteur on Human Trafficking, Dr. Joy Ezelio. She's, of course, a legal eagle and something of a constitutional expert who's delivered numerous papers and lectures on increasing women's representation through constitutional reforms in Nigeria. In 2017, the Nigerian Senate voted against a proposal to alter the constitution to provide for 35% affirmative action for women in federal and state cabinets. So, as the National Assembly begins public hearings on constitutional amendments, is it likely to be viewed more favorably this time?
We are already being bombarded by Nigerians. Nigerians can't wait to see that the electoral amendment are signed by Mr. President. And of course, the constitutional amendment is also on, and we sincerely wish to thank the Speaker, Right Honorable Femi Bajabiamila, for putting all the women of the House of Reps as members of that committee, a very important committee. We hope, even though our number keeps declining, but we hope that we will make an impact.
We have suggested, and I think that's the position of the Policy and Legal Advocacy Center, that you must tinker with the law. You must tinker with the Constitution to be able to make this happen. And tinkering with the Constitution also means to be strategic, to understand how best to do this in a way that those who currently dominate the politics are not threatened by prescriptions that have been made. And I think that's why the suggestion about creating additional seats to be contested for only by women has been made. That way, it does not mean that women cannot contest for already existing seats. They can, and rightly so, but also they do have seats that only they can contest for. And that's why in PLAC we had suggested that you should create additional seats at the state level where you have one senatorial district seat set aside for women for each state of the federation.
That's a rather intriguing idea. And the former UN Special Rapporteur on Human Trafficking, Professor Joy Ezelio, who's also the director of the Women's Aid Collective, is still with me in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us. What do you think of what Clement Nwankwo was saying there?
I think it's doable, because if you're trying to get people to give up what they have already. You know, people, and especially men, I wouldn't even say men like power. And in Nigeria, they plan ahead. They already have planned for 2023 where to contest. And all of a sudden, you come and tell them your constituency will be for women. And the seat will be reserved for women. It will be women-only constituency. And so they wouldn't take kindly, you know, to that. So, but I think what they will feel less threatened with will be creation of additional seats. You do that across Senate. When we're looking at 109 now, if you create that, that should be 37 plus FCT. You do the same, maybe double it in at House. The only disadvantage, or what people will talk about, it will be the issue of raising the cost of governance. But already it's high, so that wouldn't make that will still be addressing a social issue, and inclusion is important, and it will be part of redressing systemic injustice. So it wouldn't, if government spend money to do that effectively and get women's voice count, and importantly, I think women can raise the quality of leadership. So I like that option, but we're not going to just do one option alone. There is electoral reform going on. The electoral law should be specific with providing for affirmative action, in addition to enforcement of party constitution that also have reserved positions for women. Because in some of these parties, you'll be surprised that they have different, maybe percentage 15 to, but even in the party organ, because we can't just be looking at elective position, but at also party level, you find that women had very minimal representation. And that is important that they get involved even at all levels of the party.
Well, really, the only way that this can be done is through legislation that is enforced.
Oh, sure.
Because,
legislative quota is the best way.
Right, because if you think about it, I mean, political parties are in it to win it.
Sure.
And therefore, if they think that their chances are going to be threatened by the fact that a woman is there, they're most unlikely to do it. It's a bit like the whole thing about, you know, rotation of presidential power. I mean, yes, they're all assessing at the moment. Not the issue isn't whether someone from the southeast or wherever is you know, the issue of justice ought to be done by giving that to them. It's the fact of, can we actually win an election with this? And therefore they're hesitating because they want to see, you know, read the tea leaves before the event.
They may be shocked because women are strategizing. We are not going to, we have to, time is now for women to use their numerical strength to say this is the way we are going.
Well, that would make sense. Said it.
Because if they are the ones, and statistics have revealed that more women vote at elections. And if they do, why not vote for yourself? I know, of course, the patriarchy and then the issue of internalization of male domination,
also literacy,
and all of that has made women to think that they should be the one voting for others. Than the gladiators are the men, you know, and the women are kind of spectators. No, I think that idea is shifting because now we've seen what power can be used for the common good. We need more service-oriented elected officers who can raise the quality of leadership and remove the burden on the people and the masses, because unless women get involved, I'm not saying that women have all the answer, but I think if you look at countries that are performing well, and even that has done well, even in this COVID time, you see that they're all women-led.
Well, I mean, if you look at even Nigeria, I mean, if you look at the people who have taken the Nigerian economy from where it was during military rule to what it became later on, growing 6-7%, it was driven by women.
Exactly, and that's what we're saying, because it's important. And if we realize that progress for women is progress for men as well, and actually for the nation,
absolutely,
I think men will become more accommodating. But we're not going to wait, because if you just have to wait to be handed power over, I think this current National Assembly is far more sensitive, and I believe that we're going to
Well, I was going to ask you about that. I was going to ask you, is it fair to say that many of the men in the National Assembly come from more conservative backgrounds when it comes to issues like equality and increased participation of women in politics?
Yeah.
And therefore it makes it more difficult for you?
Yes, and I can also say it depends. But then we have also seen from past performance, just check 2015, check 2011 election, compare with 2015, you see how women's fortune has been dwindling. And then 2019, and it's not like women are facing a war that men are not facing.
It fluctuates, though,
it
doesn't
fluctuates, but it's gone bad. It's regressed, actually.
Right.
It's regressed, and that's a question.
Because
and
Goodluck
said, okay,
Jonathan had a lot of women.
and even President
working with him.
Obasanjo,
Yes.
they raised and they supported women, and you know, and in their party they had more women and they had affirmative action. And then APC also, women are challenging APC, and I know that the Mr. President has made commitment. A few women, and I was among that, went to see him 2 weeks ago, and the Honorable Minister of Women Affairs, Her Excellency Pauline Talin, has been a very strong advocate. And recently you will hear that in Plateau, a woman won the by-election, Senate. So we hope that the party can take more necessary measures, gender-sensitive measures that can mainstream women's interests in politics. I think women deserve to be, it's our right to participate in the government
Absolutely.
of our country.
I have
It's
no
our
doubt
right.
at all that if there was more women participation, there'd be improvements in governance in this country. Absolutely no doubt whatsoever. Stay with us. I would like to talk with you some more. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat with Professor Joy Ezelio about increasing the representation of women in both elective and appointed positions in Nigeria. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now, my guest today, Professor Joy Ezelio, has become a powerful figurehead for women across Nigeria who are aiming to change the overwhelmingly male picture and boys' club of appointed and elective offices in this country. In addition to working at some of the highest levels at the United Nations, she's also a law professor, a recipient of the prestigious British Chevening Scholarship, and has been conferred with the Nigerian national honor of Officer of the Order of the Niger in recognition of her outstanding contributions in the areas of nation building, legal scholarship, advocacy, civil society, and community service. But it's obviously important to point out that she didn't achieve all this just because she's a woman, but because of her towering competence. Yet, as surveys make clear, women with her level of capacity, although there are potentially tens of thousands, possibly even millions of them in this country, are still in the minority in positions of high visibility and high office in Nigeria. And the former UN Special Rapporteur on Human Trafficking, Professor Joy Ezelio, who's also the director of the Women's Aid Collective, is still with me in the studio. Thank you for staying with us. Of course, progress to close the gender gap in politics and political leadership are not unique to Nigeria, is it? I mean, you were telling us that you worked on the constitution of Rwanda, one of the most progressive countries, by the way, when it comes to gender rebalancing. But I mean, in many developed countries, it's also ludicrously slow, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But the constitutionalism or constitution making and constitutionalism in Africa has really reawakened, even a lot of interest and started setting pace for other countries, because people all of a sudden have seen it as a way of not only redressing injustices, but being progressive and embracing new democratic culture.
Absolutely.
So in some places they vote for it, and in some others they've tried, if you look at Uganda, if you look at Tanzania, to have proportional representation, to make sure everyone is included. And then Rwanda, fantastic. Look, they are among the leading countries of the world, apart from Nordic countries. Even they've surpassed even some of the Nordic countries, where it's almost like twine in one. If a man is a governor, then the deputy must be a woman. It has come to become. And I think we have to embrace that. But what is happening even with Nigerians, because you look at Nigerians who are elsewhere in diaspora, who have also dual citizenship, being ascend to the highest office.
Absolutely.
But in Nigeria, of course, the question will come in different things. What ethnic group, what is not under competence, and then you can, without knowing it, become a second-class citizen even in your own country. So, and we are not like emphasizing, and we should de-emphasize. That's why I think women getting into power, because as a woman, I think my situation is the same with every other woman, wherever you're located, whatever is your religion, whatever is your ethnic group. I don't see any ethnic group or religious group that promotes women's rights more than the other. So we should come together, use our difference as a political resource, work together to achieve our purpose and common goals of mainstreaming women, both in governance, both economic empowerment, because all of these problems are interrelated, and ensuring also elimination of violence, especially even political violence that also plays the fear on women. But above all, policy measures are very important. And we cannot go far without those policy and legal measures.
And we've got the 2023 general elections approaching. Are calls for that change likely to ring out ever louder as it approaches? Yes, because we are not sleeping, and women are not going to sleep. Because that's an opportunity.
Yeah, that's an opportunity.
To
and I think it's now and very early in
manifested.
21st, because if you don't achieve it by 2021, it gets to the eve of the election year, and then it minimizes chances, and people have already taken positions. This is the time. So I'm very happy that National Assembly started this engagement much earlier, and I believe with this, by the next quarter, this will have been wrapped up, and then we can get this interest with, especially the electoral laws, because if it provides that, fine, and then constitutionally we can amend certain provisions of the Constitution to further enhance women's position, women also, not just in elective office, but appointive office. As ministers have a particular number, now we're so far in between, even at every level. What about councillors? What about local government? How many women are local government chairmen? And this is something closest to the people, where people need to feel government.
Although the argument could be made that the local governments aren't really governing, are they?
They are not. They are not, but they get huge allocation as well.
Yeah.
That can be used also for the people, to serve the people.
Well, yes, there needs to be fundamental reform on all levels.
At all levels.
But let's talk a bit about your personal career,
Okay.
which by all accounts has been illustrious. I mean, was your personal ambition fueled by a drive to transform the face of public service, the law, etc., to make it more favorable to women, or were you just somebody who was ambitious?
Yeah, no, it was fueled by all of that, especially my becoming a lawyer wasn't by accident. It was also my seeing the injustice, including also what my mother suffered as a widow, that I started asking questions. It was then I realized, maybe growing up in a family of 6 and 2 girls, I didn't feel, because of the love, and my father treated me almost, and was also cooking for us, I didn't feel the inequality. But then with his death, and I started, understanding the unequal relationship between men and women, and then the injustices that what women are treated in a certain way because they are women, and then it was part of the resistance that I said, oh, I'm going to be a lawyer because I want to defend other people's rights. And then from there, it has been my interest. Sometime, of course, the scholarship part tried to take a upper hand. Like I got into get into corporate work and do corporate law, but all of a sudden, of course, my other passion overtook it, and I said, okay, I'm going full time into human rights and doing pro bono work, and then defending the rights of others. And it's been really, it has not been an easy journey. We've been fighting during military era, ensuring that we have the democracy we have, making sure that our voices are not drowned. And it's not easy, because for some, they will admire. These days, I think we've made a difference, because people can look you, even men, and say, my daughter said she wants to be like Joy Ezelio. Please, I want you to mentor her. And I get men, accomplished men, coming to say that, not just, even more than women now. So I think with that, we know that we are succeeding. And they have seen, if you do this work out of passion, genuinely, and it's exercising that drives the world. And I believe that, I know sometimes the environment is such that we want to lose hope, but I'm always cautiously optimistic that something will happen. And if we keep working for the change we want, that we will achieve it. I believe I will cease to be alive the day I stop being socially responsive. So,
well, I mean,
so we'll have to continue to do what we have to do.
Well, keep doing what you're doing. I mean, how did you become the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Trafficking? That's a pretty high position.
Very, very high. I'll tell you, because when I was nominated, I was somewhere, I've been doing some research at the University of London, which was also my alma mater. And then I got a call. They'd been trying to reach me frantically, sending email, and I put off my phone in the library. And someone, they said, look, you've been nominated, and they are calling you, they are trying to get you. And then, the process started, because with the nomination, you file in papers, and then there are many other countries do nominate. So it's a highly competitive thing. And at the end of the day, we had the 3 finalists, myself, South Korea, and I think someone from Mongolia or some Moldova. So we're three left, and then it became just like then permanent ambassador to the UN in Geneva told me. He just said, your CV sold you, because we couldn't, just when they looked at the final 3 and they look at your work, it was just obvious. We didn't have to do much, to push that, because you had all it takes. And
the classic overqualified, overachieving Nigerian.
But then I didn't know that it would take the kind of work that took me to over 100 countries. And then traversing the world, because it was such a, chasing traffickers, and it's not an easy work. And then you do country mission, you attend all the workshops, you also host expert meetings, you receive communications, you engage in, different bilaterals. But it's also an eye-opening, especially when it got me, what I always say, that there's no one country I've visited that I've not seen a Nigerian in situation of trafficking or irregular migration. And that's sad.
It is.
As far back as Australia, or to when I was in Uruguay on a mission, and people were thrown off raft, and they were Nigerians, and I met them at detention centers and everywhere around the world. And you're asking, why?
A bit embarrassing at the very least.
Very embarrassing. In fact, there are countries where I would go. I recall being in Warsaw, and then it was Frontex, that is the border guard of, and the country they chose to give example with was Nigeria and Ukraine. And I think by the time they realized I was a Nigerian,
there were embarrassed smirks around the room.
I'm in a meeting in Brussels, and everywhere seated, and everybody is calling Nigerian. They would just start apologizing. It's not because, but this is the feedback we're getting for every country. And the countries are addressing their problems, so you don't blame them. I tried, even in the past when I was a special rapporteur for 6 years, we normally run 2 tenures, not more than 2. So I got my tenure renewed in 2011, and then in 2014, but you see the commendation brought 3 years from Nigeria, from other countries of the world, and I got a lot of support from Germany, from Switzerland, so they said, you've done the work well, as an African woman, I didn't know
that's all you can do. But I mean,
all we can do, we have to really push in with our
but you did it exceedingly well, but you had to go, I mean, in terms of the challenges of the job, I mean, you had to go up against governments.
Yes.
In Europe, such as the Italian government, for example, I mean, about human trafficking, the menace posed by criminals engaged in modern-day slavery. I mean, people being forced into the sex trade or to become forced laborers, that sort of thing. And Italy, particularly vulnerable to people smugglers because of its geographic location and its long sort of coastline. I mean, how challenging was that? Because the big conservative governments coming and sort of going there.
It is challenging, but what I tell people after my visit in 2013 to Italy on a mission was that I found that actually the mafians, when it comes to people smuggling, are Nigerians, not Italians. They are also into other kinds of crime, but then for those, and from all the accounts of thousands of women I saw, in one Italian city, Turin, there were at least 3,000 Nigerian girls on a road walk, what they call road walk, forced prostitution. And it's Nigerian, that put them out there, they take them in, they take all their money, and they kill them if they want to escape their situation. In fact, the year I went, they murdered 7 Nigerian girls trying to escape the trafficking, exploitation, sex.
Terrible.
7 in Palermo. I met even a priest, a Nigerian priest, said that, he didn't know at the beginning people were coming, women, pray for me, before he realized their situation. So, and just like you said, Italy, in fact, there are places you go in Italy and you're just like, why are these people still here? And they've virtually abandoned it to the Naples area, to immigrants. And then immigrants, they have no water, no access to, and you see people just standing on the street the way people stand for here looking for work, casual laborers. And like I hear some people will take them for a whole day and they may give them 10 euros or nothing at the end of the day and say they will report them. And you see them and nobody will tell you that they are hungry. Terrible. And I've been to places like UAE, you go to construction labor camps and you see thousands of men, roaming. and some of them sleeping in, 20 in a room, almost standing to sleep, working 17, 18 hours in construction companies, in fishing industry, non-stop, and being thrown overboard. I mean, it was just so heart-rending.
That's partly one of the reasons why the coronavirus really exploded in Italy.
Oh, sure. With all of this, and several other countries, because trafficking knows no bounds.
But it's quite extraordinary that I understand that a lot of the people who go to those countries from Nigeria come from a particular part of the country. Is that right?
Yes, but also that is changing. Yes, they still come mostly, say majority of them from it, but it's also changing because some others are beginning to see that this is lucrative business.
Right.
And if it's a lucrative business and the issue of accountability is not there, perpetrators are not being held accountable to account, the prosecution is very low in some countries, people are known that we can make quick money out of it.
Right, okay.
So,
well, I'll tell you what, please stay with us. We've got another segment to go, so be patient. I know you've had quite a lot to do today. We appreciate your presence. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat with Professor Joy Ezelio about increasing the representation of women in both elective and appointed positions in Nigeria. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now, my guest today is the former UN Special Rapporteur on Human Trafficking, Professor Ezelio, Dean Emeritus of the Faculty of Law at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and a leading global authority on international human rights, especially on the rights of women and children in Africa. She's also a member of the United Nations Civil Society Advisory Board and is a visiting professor at several universities in North America. In her work as an advocate of women's rights and as a campaigner for affirmative action for women, she's been trying to bring Nigeria in line with global best practice with regard to gender participation. She and other very prominent women are trying to get the National Assembly to pass laws that support the increased participation of women in politics and other sectors in Nigeria. But not everyone thinks this type of legislation is helpful, and they've come up with arguments against enforced quotas for the representation of women. And Professor Joy Ezelio is still with me in the studio. Thank you for staying with us. I'm just wondering, because I'm sure you make a lot of assessments as you meet different people and as you go along with your advocacy. What are some of the most strident arguments that you've come across of people saying that, we're not going to open the doors? We don't like enforced quotas, and we don't want any more female participation in government.
The argument goes from the mundane to even other legal issues. For some, they will think, oh, we don't want our women to get there. They should just be there and play a role in a domestic sphere. If we just let them go, politics is bad, is the murky waters. We don't want to stain them. Just be there.
It's immoral.
It's immoral.
It will spoil them.
It will spoil them. So you don't want it to be spoiled good. Please, just remain in the house. And to more serious issues for those who would think this will be discrimination if you have affirmative action, because Section 42 of the Constitution prohibits discrimination. But then they don't also look at the argument that women have a right to participate and that they have to participate equally, and you have to ensure that that the system doesn't function in a way that the consequence is discriminatory on them. And you have to take positive action to make sure that they participate and exercise that their right.
What about the corporate boardroom? I mean, because I'm wondering, you would think that in the corporate world that they'd be focused more on, maximizing their profits, putting the best person there to help develop things and so on.
Yeah, now I would say that some are becoming very sensitive because they are seeing other multinational setting targets that we're going to have 40% of women in decision-making position, or even 50-50. And with that global best practice, people are beginning to compete at international level, becoming an ethical issue as well.
But is that part of what you're fighting for as well?
It is, but it just, at times you have to just prioritize.
Right.
Where do you begin? Why don't we start even from the public? doing what is right to ensure that full participation, because power belongs to people. And then we move to private, but we are fighting with all, I mean, how do I put it? We're just fighting in different fronts, because you also need to achieve that at decision making, because we have seen policies that if women were on the board and at decision level, making level, it will not happen. Can you imagine there was a time a bank, for example, said, oh, we're not going to allow couples to work in this bank. And if there are couples working there, we expect them to resign. And tell me who was to resign? The woman. And it doesn't matter, the woman was in a higher position until women started kicking against this policy. You look at some policies of targets and the impact and almost closet prostitution of women, in the name of marketing. So we have to look at, we need women at that level. It is very, very important.
Right, okay, we've made the point of the fact that women need to be in those positions.
So we shut out the glass ceiling, and even on equal wages that
right.
they earn. So many things.
Sure. Well, as we approach the end of the program, let's just reiterate for us what it'll take to effect the kind of legal change that you want to see to enable greater affirmative action for women in Nigeria.
We want a constitutional reform that we recognize right there in the Constitution, as has been done in other countries. There are abundance of examples of constitutions of the world, and in Africa, more than 20 we can count and say, why not do that? So apart from constitutional provisions that will recognize affirmative action in elective positions and in appointed positions, we want to see certain sections of the Constitution amended to give effect to that. Section 42, Section 14.3, Section 147, Section 192, and even the ones dealing with INEC. We want to also see electoral laws currently being debated, the one that had public hearing today, include women and include affirmative action. We want to see party legislative quotas. We want to see an independent bill that will support women's participation, so that it can become, we just need to fight at all levels and achieve it. But above all, if they can't do it, but they will do it constitutionally.
I was going to ask you, have you been encouraged by what you've been hearing from the National Assembly? Because, I mean, they've said they're considering making quotas for women, incorporating that into constitutional
at least we're encouraged that one of the issues that for the memo that they were collecting and listening, that gender is part of that, gender and special interest. That's encouraging. At least that gives us opportunity to do. We are doing our mappings. We are getting a sense of those who are in support. We are seeing also that the leadership appear to be in support, especially at the level of the Speaker and Deputy Senate President. And we hope that the other Senate President can also give leadership support for that.
Is there, though, I mean, if there is the perception that women are being constantly discriminated against and that they just can't make it through without government help, could that end up being counterproductive? Does it possibly undermine women?
I think we would demand it as of right, and in fact, as I speak to you now, women are already in court trying to enforce that right.
Yes,
and then, as you may know, also, even in 1999, I sued the government of Enugu State for non-inclusion of women in the State Executive Council, and they have to dissolve it and appointed women as a commissioner. So we have to also use the strategic litigation. We can take it up to African region. We have Nigeria has already ratified both other relevant international convention on elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. They've ratified the African Charter on rights of the African Charter, human rights, and they have ratified the African Charter's protocol on rights of women in Africa. So they have an obligation to enforce it, and indeed, African Charter is another level of domestic human rights regime in Nigeria. It's applicable domestically. So because it has been transformed to a local law, so we have legal basis to challenge government action. So we're not just begging, and then you see other committees like CEDAW Committee. In the last, when they reviewed Nigeria's state party report, they called on Nigeria to ensure increased participation of women. The same with the Universal Periodic Review. The same with the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the Human Rights Treaty Body. So with all of this, listen, these are the basis. And above all, women have a right to participate in politics, to be elected into offices, because and it's not enough for government to say, okay, but we're not discriminating. No, but those policies are indigeneity
Right.
policy, a lot of citizenship question, who is a citizen in the democratic state Nigeria, why is it that women can contest if they are married out of state, even within the same state if they are
Yeah.
married in
But I think all
different
those
states.
things are
All
under
of those are-
consideration
exactly.
now. But let me, we've just got less than a minute before we have to end this absolutely fascinating chat. And your assessment sounds really sober and measured. Perhaps Nigeria is overdue for a female president. Do you have political ambitions?
I think we have to fix the system first. I've always
So that's
thought
not saying that you don't have political
exactly, but I
ambitions.
think we have to fix the system, because we don't just want to come in and then play the game the way it's being played. Rather that we work on the side to make sure that the system works and it's what it's supposed to be, and then so that we don't end up saying you join them, in order to make it. But definitely, yes, every day we play political roles, we play leadership roles in different capacities. But for now, I think being on the front line for pushing for these changes that will make Nigeria greater, because I
Okay.
believe that a new Nigeria is possible, and I believe that we can get the change we want if we really push for that. And I'm really on the side of pushing for things to happen. I believe in transmission.
Professor Joy Ezelio, I want to thank you very much
Thank you.
indeed. Absolutely brilliant talking with
Thank you.
And she is, of course, the former UN Special Rapporteur on Human Trafficking. She's the director of the Women's Aid Collective and is a law professor. That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye and thank you for watching.